I just read a mini biography of a pastor named Charles Simeon from a book called 12 Faithful Men. And he left quite a mark on present-day Christianity because of his humility. Have you ever heard of Charles Simeon? Most people haven't. I want you to listen to this. When Simeon was an undergraduate at Cambridge University, he would pass by Holy Trinity Church, which was on the campus, and wonder what it would be like to preach the gospel there and be a herald for him at the university. In 1782, his dream came true, and so did his nightmare. At 23 years of age, he replaced the pastor who just died. But the congregation protested that they didn't want Simeon, they wanted another pastor, and they petitioned the overseer, the bishop of the church, to replace him with the person they wanted. The congregation protested by locking the rented pews when the overseer put Charles Simeon in the position anyway. But the congregation instead hired another man as a guest speaker at twice the salary of Charles Simeon. So they protested when Charles Simeon came to preach. They had rented pews and they would lock them and they wouldn't show up to the services. So Simeon, at his own expense, set up seats in the aisle. Apparently the seats and the pews at the time were rented and locked, and you must have had your names on it or something, but the congregation would lock it. Simeon bought chairs at his own expense, and the overseers of the church would take those chairs out of the aisle and throw them out into the street. Do you think he'd give up by then? Simeon didn't. So he tried to start a Sunday evening service, but was again opposed, so he backed off. He tried again the next year and was rebuked. And the third time that he tried to have a Sunday service, they locked him out of his own church. When his congregation finally allowed him to start a Sunday night service, Cambridge University, the university where he was trained, in opposition scheduled a Greek lecturer at the very same hour. They did not want anyone sitting under Charles Simeon's gospel preaching, and they made it hard for him. Anyone who wanted to hear Simeon preach had to travel in groups so they wouldn't get beat up by the church members as they came to church. After each service, guards were stationed at the doors to prevent fights between congregants and troublemakers. Despite these precautions, rocks were thrown and drunken disturbances occurred when he preached. Pastor Simeon himself was even pelted with rotten eggs. I tell you, I'd probably give up by then. He didn't. You know how long he endured this type of treatment from his congregation? 12 years. 12 years he endured this abuse, faithfully shepherding his hostile flock, in spite of the fact that the congregation continued to circulate one petition after another, demanding that he be removed. Why? Because he preached the gospel. Simeon wrote this: "It was painful indeed to see the church almost forsaken. But I thought if God would only give a double blessing to those who did attend, there would be much good done." So a wise man gave Simeon this advice: to soar heavenward, he must grow downwards in humility. He took this to heart and submitted himself to the antagonistic leadership of this church who hated him. Can you imagine that? He went to those people who hated him, who tried to get him replaced, and he submitted himself to them. He says, I'm going to trust God with this. During this painful period, Charles Simeon observed 3 lessons that a minister must learn. Here it is. Lesson 1, humility. Lesson number 2, humility. Lesson number 3, humility. And he never gave up, and he never gave in. He ended up pastoring that flock for 54 years and ultimately influenced generations with the gospel. Today, the ministries of universities and colleges fellowship in the United Kingdom was founded because of him. InterVarsity Christian Fellowship in the United States was founded because of him. And the International Fellowship of Evangelical Students worldwide was founded because of him. They can all trace their roots back to the faithfulness of Charles Simeon. He took to heart what Jesus said: anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all.